Many people are not allowed to or are dissuaded from visiting other churches of different Christian denominations, sometimes even dissuaded from other church buildings within the same denomination. Not only so, but many scoff at the idea of house meetings, even though that's what the early church had, and who has convinced them that other Christian denominations are heretical if not by their own leadership. This has to be taught in order to be effective, and I've got a subnote for that thought coming up in just a moment. Certainly, the Bible does not name off bad Christian denominations to avoid, but only those folks who were denying Jesus Christ, the Antichrist, as it mentions in 1 John 2:22, 1 John 4:1 through 3, or who were corrupting and changing God's established word on purpose to fit their own views, as we see in 2 Timothy 4, verses 3 through 4, and 2 Peter 2, verses 1 through 3. On the other hand, Paul had begged Christians who were trying their best to follow Jesus through the established word, but who may have differed in some biblical interpretations, not to separate on account of such trifling differences. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 1, verses 12 through 13. Now this I say, that every one of you says, I'm of Paul, I of Apollos, I of Cephas, I'm of Christ, and in modern day terms, I'm a Baptist, I'm a Pentecostal, I'm oneness, etc. Is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you, or were you baptized in the name of Paul? Now I've actually seen members of the same natural family gathering in peace together for Christmas time at a single designated home who would not dare walk in on other of their family members' church buildings if it were a different denomination than theirs. Yes, folks, natural buildings do make a difference for many people. I got another subnote coming up for that thought. Now, having said all of this, I'm also aware that we as Christians, being combined and built together, can also be a household or a temple of God, but which has nothing to do with a natural building, a crew of leaders, church politics, governmental systems. It's an assemblage of like-minded people, not in man's doctrine, but in godly love, who are on fire for God and God's ways. Let's look at Ephesians 2, 19 through 22. Now therefore you are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints, and of the household of God, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, and Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building fitly framed together grows unto a holy temple of the Lord, in whom you also are builded together for an habitation of God through the Spirit. And 1 Peter 2:5, you also as lively stones are built up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. So, in conclusion to such thoughts, the temple of God is individually, yet in a broader sense, it can also be universal, but only when it has absolutely nothing to do with a man-driven community of politics, social status, I can't say that right, social status, nor of carnal intents. Now let's go to the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verse 2a. This is Jesus talking. In my Father's house, i.e., one big main assemblage temple, are many mansions. Many temples and bodies within that one larger house. Now, it may seem exhaustive to some that I even went this route at all, for my ending result was that a brotherhood of believers do exist and can also be termed the temple of God. But the bottom line of what I was trying to say was, and once again, and as William Tyndale was trying to explain, and what I had quoted earlier from him, I think in an explanatory note, was that the true church of God, or in much rather the true congregation of God, has nothing to do with a man-made structure, like a natural building. No, but of a governmental backbone that's actually behind many assemblies, and of which applies man-made rules that must be obeyed and followed, but of which have no basis in Scripture. The building itself is nothing, and we can gather in one just fine with no problems. But once a government is established in many cases, and I'm talking about man's government, not God's government, there is a difference, then man's flesh begins to take over. Again, in a lot of cases, not everyone. We start seeing mankind becoming the head of the church instead of Christ. Really? Is that really true? Do things like that really happen in some places? Now, once again, I go over all these things and in extreme detail in my aforementioned book, The Church and the Fivefold Ministry, Should We Put Our Trust in Man?, which I'm also reading on video. But this is the baseline of what I have been stressing so hard, because such spirits of men are more reminiscent of Circe than of God. And I spoke of Circe or Kirk in that explanatory note during this chapter. If you missed that, please go back and check that out. It's very interesting stuff.